Today's episode of the Failing Justice podcast is brought to you by Carlson Solutions, a private investigation firm located in Dallas-Fort Worth and East Texas. We specialize in a wide range of investigations, including background checks, surveillance, defense case investigations, and more. For professional, discreet services you can trust, visit us at carlsonsolutions.net.
In a world where justice is supposed to be blind, there are those who believe the scales are tipped in favor of the powerful. The ones who are meant to protect us are often the ones who cause the most harm. The police force, sworn to serve and protect, have become a symbol of fear and mistrust for many. And the court system, designed to ensure justice for all, has failed time and time again. But there are those who refuse to be silenced, who fight for change, and who demand accountability. Join our host, former Texas police officer and major crimes detective, Justin Carlson, on a journey through the darkness, as he shines a light from his extensive 14 years of experience on police injustice and the failed court system, and as he speaks with the many others who have also experienced injustice. This is Failing Justice.
Welcome to the Failing Justice podcast. I am your host, as always, Justin Carlson. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the podcast. I know we have a lot of loyal listeners. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening and for following the journey of not only myself, but the evolution of the Failing Justice podcast. We have a guest here with us. I'm going to go ahead and hop right into it. Very special guest. His name's Mike Hollow. Mike Hollow is a former sheriff's deputy with the Lee County Sheriff's Office in Florida. And some of you may have heard of Lee County, and if you haven't, you're going to find out exactly what Lee County is about. And but Mike was a sheriff's deputy there, but he had began his career in EMS over in Boston, but in 2004 he began his career in law enforcement at the Lee County Sheriff's Office in Florida. And Mike served in many various positions and roles. He was at patrol. He did major crimes investigations, doing robbery and homicide. He was an internal affairs commander. He did canine patrol. He was a watch commander, did a little bit of time in aviation, which is super cool. I know that's kind of big in Florida, and hostage negotiations. And so, like I said, Mike is just a well-rounded law enforcement officer, has a lot of experience and knowledge, and we're happy to have him here, Mike. I want you to introduce yourself, though, because I think you'll kind of give our audience a better introduction of yourself than I would. So if you don't mind, man, welcome to the show, and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Justin. You did a great job of introducing me. But yeah, I started my career in 2004, relocating here from Massachusetts. I was a police officer up in Massachusetts as well after EMS. So coming down to Southwest Florida, it was a whole different lifestyle to start working as a police officer, sheriff's deputy down here than it was compared to what I was used to up north. But yeah, I've been really blessed in my career to be able to serve in so many capacities and serve the public and work with a lot of great people. Now, I know a lot of people are saying like I started in 2004, 17 years, those numbers just don't add up. And you're right, it doesn't. So I did 2004 to 2016. I owned a couple of businesses here locally, and I stepped away in 2016, and I focused on growing those businesses. At some point in time, my son was getting out of the Army, and he had told me that he always wanted to work with me at the Lee County Sheriff's Office, so it kind of sucked me back in. So that's where I did another 4 years, and that's where the 17 years comes from.
So your son's a cop at Lee County currently, or he was?
No,
wow.
He still is.
That makes this story that we're about to get into even more interesting. I didn't know that, man. That's super cool. So you got to serve alongside him for a little while.
I did, and there's another twist to that too. When I went back in 2019, I went back to canine, which was my passion in law enforcement, right? There's nothing greater than working with a canine. So I worked my patrol dog for 4 years, and then I was able to hand my dog over to my son, who is actively working my dog now. So
Wow.
it's never happened in the history of the Lee County Sheriff's Office or anywhere around here that I know of. So he's working the same dog that I worked for 4 years.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that. So that is super cool to hear, man. I'm sure you're a proud dad, man, and
I
I'm
am.
sure your son, like, at some point, if you're gone and your son's still, still serving or whatever, I'm sure he'll always have those memories, and so that's super cool, man. So, and I understand the business aspect too. I've done that, so I totally get it. Can definitely still hear your northern accent a little bit, though. I think you still that never went away.
No, it's
I can still hear it a little bit. So, but tell me, so you did all those years in law enforcement. What your transition into politics? Kind of tell us. You're running for sheriff of
I
of Lee County in Florida, and
yes.
so you went from being a deputy at the sheriff's office to running for the top position at that agency. Tell us what motivated you to run for sheriff, or was there like a specific moment or issue that kind of pushed you into the political arena?
Honestly, when I left in December of 2023, I was done with law enforcement. I had done my time. I, got the T-shirt, so to speak, and I was done. I was ready to go on and just continue running some of my businesses that I own. But then I was approached in March, right? And so let me back up a little bit, because the last year and a half that I was there at the sheriff's office, like, the morale was going down. As probably as a direct result as from the administration, which a lot of agencies are enduring right now. So I wasn't in a position to be able to change that morale, but I also wasn't trying to do anything at that point in time. So fast forward to March of 2024, I was approached by an individual who at the time, and for your listeners that don't know, every sheriff's office in the state of Florida, it's an elected position. So the sheriff is an elected position. It's not hired. It's not appointed. It's not any of that stuff. So I was approached by an individual in March of 2024, and who happened to be very close friends, who referred to himself as the cousin of the sheriff. And I was really hesitant about talking to this individual, and he gave me some information that just made my inner core turn. Right, it went against every value I had and the respect that I have for the uniform and for the badge. I spent a lifetime in that badge. My family spent many years in the badge. So it means a lot to me to be able to represent a uniform and represent the brotherhood nationwide, and to have what was
Absolutely.
going on and have what was alleged going on. It really bothered me. And so what he was saying was he was given money by the current sheriff as a contractor, and he then had to take $1,700 of that money to give it back to the sheriff's dad to pay for the sheriff's dad's car. And those are some serious allegations, right? So, like, what do you do with that when you're retired and you're not really in a position to change anything? So, what I did with it is I just started reaching out to some sources that I have still at the time are active at the sheriff's office, and I started to have them pull me some information coupled with what this individual gave me. Um, which ended up becoming that audio that I'm sure you're going to play at some point in time.
Hmm.
So after I was able to address and kind of confirm the things that he was telling me from his side, this was a gross misappropriation of taxpayer dollars and essentially money laundering. Um, and you can't have that at any level in law enforcement, let alone at the top, because one of those acts, it takes away 10, 15 years of trust with the public. Law enforcement is a tumultuous field when we're dealing with the public as it is. We don't need this on top of it. We don't need the head law enforcement officer in the county misappropriating taxpayer dollars and taking
Right.
advantage of it. Right. So it essentially will become a perfect storm, and we don't know how deep this really goes. So there were some other things that he had given me, and I talked to my family, and I excluded my son from this specifically because he still works there. So he had no idea what I was doing at any point in time, because it is a very political field in Florida. So I took the stance of, if I have the knowledge and I do nothing with it, I'm just as guilty as those that are committing the act.
Mm-hmm.
So I myself and the individual who is known as Mr. Romano, Ken Romano, we went and we sat down with the FBI in March of 2024, with the FBI and an assistant U.S. attorney. And then from there, the FBI took over their investigation. So, that's the
So I do have a clip. I want to play it. It's a news clip. It's a couple of minutes long, but I want to play it so our audience can hear it, and also see it if they go to YouTube. So let me play this, and then we'll talk more about it.
Breaking news right now at 6. NBC2 is uncovering new documents that reveal the Lee County Sheriff's Office is spending hundreds of thousands of tax dollars on consultants. Thank you for watching NBC2. I'm Peter Bush.
And I'm Kelly Burns. This after allegations of money laundering and claims that Sheriff Carmine Marceno is under investigation by the FBI. NBC2 Chief Political Correspondent Dave Elias has been investigating and has this new information tonight.
Yeah, Kelly, not only do I have the contract for consultant Ken Romano, who was paid $5,700 a month, and he claims ordered to give back $1,700 to the sheriff's father, I've also uncovered 14 other documents. One to a former state senator, a personal trainer, and even what appears to be a dog. These contracts total a whopping $53,000 a month in taxpayer money, or that's $636,000 annually. This is the contract that Honorary Deputy Ken Romano signed to work as a contractor for Carmine Marceno. It shows that he was paid $5,700 a month for what he says was next to no work.
If I went 5 times in the 6 months I worked there, it was a lot.
Romano said every month he would take $1,700 and funnel it to Marceno's father so he could pay for a Mercedes.
Every month I would just give his father the money. I would take cash, I'd throw it on top of the medicine cabinet.
Today, NBC2 obtained 14 similar consultant agreements. According to this one, with former state senator Lisbeth Benaquisto, the sheriff paying her $9,000 a month in taxpayer money to attend meetings and provide advice, a total of $216,000 over 2 years. The sheriff paid personal trainer Scott Griffith $129,000 to oversee the sheriff's training division. And finally, Von Schnudel, LLC, over $93,000 of taxpayer money, and it appears to be a dog. Its owner, Grace Birch, signed the contract as a consultant for the Animal Abuse Task Force. I took all of this to the sheriff's office today. As you saw from that video, I was inside the Lee County Sheriff's Office. I had a very brief conversation with the sheriff. I asked him to go on record and do an on-camera interview and answer our questions. But again, he declined.
With an active investigation, that it's more likely than not that all participants, including the sheriff, have been asked not to comment until that investigation is concluded.
The FBI said it will neither confirm or deny an investigation. Sheriff Marceno said in his statement this week, quote, "It's unfortunate that politics has reached this level. These politically motivated and baseless claims from a disgruntled employee are obviously untrue." Now, also breaking right now, NBC2 has just confirmed that Sheriff Carmine Marceno sent out this memo to his employees announcing a 7% pay raise. He says he also plans to hire an additional 30 patrol officers. In all, the sheriff is requesting $315 million in his budget for next year. That is $38 million than last year. Live in the studio, Dave Elias, NBC2.
That's some pretty wild stuff. There's a lot to unpack there. So I think my first question, in response to the video, is the details of the allegation. So you said that you went to the FBI along with Mr. Romano.
Yes.
Okay. So are you the FBI saying that they can't confirm or deny that there's an investigation going on? What does that mean? Do you know what that means?
Yeah, that's their standard response, right? They'll never tip anybody off of if there's anything or not anything going on. But that's been their response since the 1940s, 50s. I'm sure.
Okay. All the information that they talked about in that video, and I'm assuming that NBC News 2 probably have done their own investigation, I'm sure. And they uncovered all the other contracts. I think you mentioned 14. Did you know about all the rest of those whenever this first happened, or was that something that came out after the fact?
No, I did know about those. There was a couple of them that I was shocked about, but I did know about more additional contract employees. There's actually some more that they did not get. And there's the ones that they talked about are active ones. There's some that are no longer active that came before Mr. Romano. So when we talk about misappropriation of taxpayer dollars, that's like this Ken Romano situation is the tip of the iceberg. Below the water, this is huge. We don't know the extreme that this is going to go to until that sheriff is removed, whether it's through election or through force by the governor, and a new sheriff comes into play and does a forensic audit.
And let's talk about that for just a minute. I got a couple questions on what you just said. So you mentioned the governor. So the governor actually endorsed Sheriff Marceno in not too long ago. And I guess in his defense, I guess, I'm not trying to dog Governor DeSantis. I'm just saying, and you can, we can speak on this, but in his defense, I guess, would this have been before all this came out, before he had knowledge of this? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Or do you know?
Yeah, that's correct. Like the governor wouldn't have any knowledge of any of this stuff, right? And I will say that the sheriff's office does a great job of branding the current sheriff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the average person, it looks like the sheriff's office is doing amazing things. They just don't see what's going on behind the scenes that, as law enforcement officers, we get to see. Is any agency perfect? No, we know that. But to the average citizen, it looks like it's like Barnum and Bailey Circus, right? There's so many moving parts that it looks like this amazing thing is going on, and but you're not realizing like a duck where the feet are moving so fast underwater, but it's nice and calm on the surface, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many moving parts that we get to be privy of. So I can understand why the governor would endorse him, right? He's a popular name recognition, all that stuff. But
you're right. I mean, I've watched him on TikTok. He's a big TikTok star. No nonsense, tough on crime sheriff. And Florida's known for that anyway. I know you got Grady Judd over in Polk County, and then Wayne Ivey. I can't remember the county he's in. But Florida is known for tough on crime sheriffs, and when you see those videos on TikTok and social media, you automatically think, okay, this guy's, he's all about getting out here and putting these guys in what he calls the Marceno Hotel. But as a law enforcement officer, a previous law enforcement officer, I look at those videos and I say, and I know we're in a different time, we're in a different era, different generation when it comes to community policing and how you reach people. I get it. I'm all for TikTok. I'm not saying I'm not, I think it's a good tool, but to me, man, I see a bunch of staged videos.
Yes.
It looks like a big production. Like they are setting up, getting the whole SWAT team out there dressed up in the nines. You know, the big 18-wheelers, all the, just pomp and circumstance, if you would.
Yeah.
Just to produce these TikTok videos, and like you said, and I've said it so many times on this show, the problem in law enforcement is people don't see what happens behind the scenes. It's all about, I think you can go all across this country, in many law enforcement agencies. I would dare say most law enforcement agencies. It's all about what it appears rather than what it actually is. Are there some people happy at the Lee County Sheriff's Office, employees? Probably so. But are there employees that are not happy, but they have to have a job, and if they don't say anything, they can keep their job, and the moment that they do, they'll be retaliated against. You and I know that that's the name of the game. Mm-hmm. And so now that you've come out and you've brought these things to light that people, that the general public didn't know about, the sheriff, one thing, Sheriff Marceno, one thing that stands out to me is, why won't the guy come out and make a statement? Now, I know he made a short written statement, and it was in the video we just played, and he says his response, they're politically motivated claims. And so I guess my question to you, like, how would you, and his attorney too, Donald Day, I think is his name, I guess, what is your response to him saying, Sheriff Marciano saying that these claims are politically motivated?
Yeah, so in the state of Florida, and being an IA commander, like, I fully understand the internal affairs practices of what goes on, right? So if any law enforcement officer in the state of Florida is under allegations of a criminal charge, or something involving something of significance, that most of the time, 99.9% of the time, that officer is going to be put on administrative leave, either with pay or without pay, depending on if the agency can corroborate and substantiate it right then. So
unless you're admin, Mike,
yeah,
man, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's fact. It seems like unless you're administration, you get put on leave, arrested within days, fired within days. But for whatever reason, and it's that way in Texas here too. I had a chief that I exposed at my previous agency, and we were a very small agency too, and they just let the guy stay in the office right next to me. They didn't put him on leave, and I mean, these were serious allegations that he fired me. He fired me because I was asking questions. Same thing, kind of some misappropriation of funds type thing.
Yep.
He fired me, and then 8 weeks later, because I was gone, I didn't have to worry about what I was saying or tiptoe on anybody. I just put it all out there, and then 8 weeks later, he was forced to resign by the city manager and city council. And I look back, and I'm like, to your point, I look back and I say, so you understand that what I showed you was factual, but look back to how you treated me and all the other guys and gals that was in on this investigation that had complaints. You just left him in the office with us to continue to make decisions, continue to retaliate against us, for us to walk on eggshells, have anxiety, and you left him in the office. And
that's what people don't realize.
Yeah. So I'll let you finish. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to make a point and say that is factual. It's true. Why is he still in that sheriff's office, able to make the administrative decisions for such a large agency while this is happening? And all his response is, it's politically motivated.
So I have multiple responses to that, but going back to your point, the employees of the sheriff's office, they are on pins and needles. They are anxious. They're afraid to talk. Before this, they're even more afraid to talk now, right? And you're like, I'm going to go back a little step further. Like, of all the donations that the sheriff received, 60% of those were from active law enforcement and their family members. That suggests a strong pay-to-play system. That doesn't happen, right? You're talking nearly $500,000, and 60% of that is from law enforcement. That doesn't happen. But so is this politically motivated? No. Am I disgruntled? Yeah, actually, I'm pissed off because he brought a bad light to the uniform that I wore for so many years. You know, those TikToks that you referred to, they are staged. The SWAT team goes in and clears the building, and then they have to do it again so the sheriff can carry a rifle or he can go in there and feel important, right? So yeah, those acts that the public sees isn't an active portrayal of what's really going on. They don't get to see, like we talked about before. So, but back to your question, is this politically motivated? Well, everything that I revealed before the sheriff made his comment and before NBC, right? I gave the audio. I was ready to come up with the receipts of the deposits being made to Ken Romano's bank statements, but the sheriff's office corroborated everything I said. They released their bank ledger as well, and it coincided with every single deposit that I had said. You know, at one point in time, they terminated Ken Romano's services with the Lee County Sheriff's Office as a contractor because they said he was under investigation. Okay, that's great. If it's a legitimate contractor, I can understand that. But why did you offer a new contract this year to take effect in July of this year? Right? So I went a step further. About the because there are a lot of people that are saying, "Oh, how convenient you waited till a couple months before the election." Here's what I told our local media: if the governor removes Carmine from office, I will pull myself out of the race. Let the governor appoint somebody temporarily so that we can do a special election and the residents of this county can decide who is sheriff. This has nothing to do with politics. This has everything to do with standing up for what's right and being the voice of so many that are voiceless right now. So this is not political. As a political candidate, I get a much greater leeway of freedom of speech than the average citizen. So I'm going to use that voice, and that's why.
What you're doing, man, and you know, we talked a little bit about this off camera, is just that I believe that what you're doing is, I mean, number one, it's brave, it's hard, and I feel like what you're doing is for the right reason. So I have a question. So when you go in, so many questions as we're talking, I'm trying to remember them all. I have some written down here, but then as we're talking, there's so many more that come up that's not even on, on my notes. But when you go in the comments of the various social media postings, whether it's Facebook or TikTok, or YouTube, because there's so many of them out there, you do see kind of, you have one side, hey, we support the sheriff. We love this guy. We got your back. And then you got the other people that are like, hey, this is a problem. We have a problem with this. And I think that's just the world that we live in. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. I don't get on Twitter because Twitter is one of the biggest dumpster fire social media platforms I've ever seen in my life. I don't like to get on there because it's so bad, man. So much division and hatred. But my point to that is, I think that's just the world we live in. I think there's division. Everybody's going to pick a side, right? And unfortunately, for whatever reason, right isn't always the side that's chosen. And I mean, that's just reality, and we know that. But I think that probably goes back to something you said earlier, how the sheriff has done a great job at branding himself and branding the Lee County Sheriff's Office. I mean, you just watch those videos, man, and people know about the guy just because of what he's done in the branding department, which wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing if it's done for the right reasons. I think, and I don't know him, man. I don't. I don't. But being in the profession long enough, I can look at something like that And I think I can confidently say it just appears like he loves a camera, and he loves the attention. One thing that I read. Well, let me ask a question actually real quick about Mr. Romano. They're calling him I've heard the term a couple of times, a ghost employee. What
Yes.
was he? I mean, what was I haven't seen the contract. I was going to get my hands on it, but I didn't before the show. What was he doing? What was his contract service supposed to be for the Lee County Sheriff's Office to receive $5,700 a month? Because that's a lot of money, if we're being honest.
Yeah, it is. It's more than what some deputies make. Like,
Yeah.
let's be honest, right? So the term ghost employee was something that I came up with, which just was like they're never there. They're just a fit. You hear the name, they're just a figure. So his contract was for marketing, and because of his experience and expertise in marketing, and because he had the necessary qualifications, that man will tell you he has no qualifications in marketing. If you were to look at his own social media website, like you said, it's a dumpster fire. There's nothing going on there, right? He has no high school diploma, which you don't need a high school diploma to be educated and be business minded and be savvy, and I understand that. But
Right.
he nothing to substantiate and back up their claim of him being a marketing expert.
Do you know? And if you can't answer something, obviously I believe you'll just say that you
Yeah.
can't, and I respect that. But do you know? I'm curious, and for our listeners, how Mr. Romano became in contact with Sheriff Marciano. Like, what was their relationship for him to say, "Hey, let me bring you on board for $5,700 a month to do marketing"? Do you know
Yeah.
anything about that?
So they were friends. I think they got an introduction from the previous sheriff, is my belief. But Carmine and Ken, they used to go gambling together all the time. They used to go to the casinos all the time. They would talk to each other all the time. So they did have a friendship. And Ken brags that he was able to, even though he has no law enforcement background, but he was able to call the sheriff and have people moved simply because he was friends with Carmine.
So the video incident, there's a video out there, and I will play that.
Is that the money one?
Yeah, I guess Mr. Romano owns a jewelry store, and
Yep.
so in this video, there's a stack of money. I don't know how much money's there, but I mean it's a stack, and it is Mr. Romano handing that to the sheriff. Now, can you speak on that video? How, I mean, is that surveillance video? Was that video that Mr. Romano set up on purpose? And what was that actual transaction about? Are you able to speak on those things?
Yeah, so it was surveillance video. The one from above is the closed circuit TV. The one that was down below, almost at waist level, is kind of like a Ring camera or an Arlo, where he's just kind of watching for his employees to watch behind the counter. So they are business cameras. It was inside Mr. Romano's business, and it was in fact Carmine and Ken there. What the cash was for, I don't know, because Ken would not tell me. He just told me he couldn't tell me what the cash was for. It's really suggestive and really concerning simply because it did come right before the new contract was to go into play. I'm not saying it's directly correlated to that, but there's a lot of questions that I, as a law enforcement officer, as a resident of this county, that I have that I know other people have as well. And then you piggyback that on the fact that the sheriff, Carmine, bought a condo in a neighboring county for $600,000 cash, but there's no record or no disclosure as required in our state.
So I did read that. I read that not only did he buy a $600,000 condo, I guess he also drives a Ferrari. The sheriff drives a Ferrari or owns a Ferrari.
Yes.
Okay. Now, listen, I know as the chief law enforcement officer of any chief administrator of any agency makes money, and I would imagine Chief Marciano probably makes a pretty good deal of money there for his position. I think he's probably well compensated, but even still, I personally do not know of a law enforcement officer or even a chief or a sheriff that has a $500,000, more than $500,000 condo that drives a Ferrari, because you just don't that's not standard in law enforcement. Now, I guess my question to that would be, maybe he has some personal investments maybe we don't know about, maybe an inheritance that he received at some point. Maybe his family's wealthy. I'm not sure. Do you know about any of those things? Because I find it odd that he's able to afford these things as a cop.
Right.
Just be candid about it.
Right. And he has a mortgage on his primary residence, which is homesteaded. But so the question becomes, and I've been asked this question, maybe he was a smart investor. Yeah. And he disclosed that he won $453,000 in gambling last year. So could it be from that? Maybe. Yeah, that's significant, right? If you're gambling that much, how much are you winning that much? How much are you actually gambling? But in our state, they recently changed and required, it's called a Form 6, where you have to list out individual assets as well as bank accounts and liabilities as well. So not only bank accounts, but retirement accounts. You have to paint this a very transparent picture financially to the public.
And that's required as a elected official. Is that what you're saying?
Even as a candidate, it's required.
Okay. Wow.
But yes, as an elected official, and there's no extra $600,000 just sitting there. So
yeah, I mean it's bizarre. I will agree with you that is, that's extremely bizarre, and I think it's, when you put it up against the rest of this, you said it. I think not only as a law enforcement officer, but I think anybody as a citizen of Lee County would have questions about that. Like, I mean, you could say all day long, oh well, I have a right to have a personal life, and you do, but when you're that flashy and you're in such a position of of command and a sheriff of a pretty decent sized agency at a popular place in Florida, I mean, these are questions you're gonna have to answer. And what I find strange is, and I think I said this earlier, why hasn't he come out and said, other than it's a shame politics have gone this way and these are, politically motivated attacks and they're baseless. NBC, I think, has tried reaching out to him multiple times. They've gone in person. They've tried to sit down and talk to him on camera, and he won't go on camera. If that were me, I'm just going to be honest. If somebody were, or if these allegations were against me and they were not true, bring all the cameras in here, and I'm gonna tell you why this isn't true, and I'm gonna show you why it isn't true, and we're gonna have a conversation about it. And I'm sure, and also, why did he go hire a high-powered criminal defense attorney? I'm not saying you can't seek the advice of an attorney in a situation like this, but all of that, to me, it just seems a little bit off.
Yeah, and the old adage, where there's smoke, there's fire, right?
Yeah.
And we have a lot of smoke. And if this were a Dateline episode, the beginning of a Dateline episode, the audience viewership would be asking the same questions that I'm asking, that now the public is asking. So I think you can't, as a higher up, as a command person, promote and suggest transparency and require and demand transparency, and then you hide behind a steel curtain yourself. Because what does that say to the brand new officer?
What is, with you working there for such a long time, and even as of just recently this year, when What is the morale like within the Lee County Sheriff's Office? And like I said earlier, I know there's going to be some people that are, all about it. Some people that don't care because they don't understand it. You have a lot of, I can tell you for the biggest part of my career in the beginning, I didn't understand any of it. I was just happy to be there and do my job. So I understand that there's going to be, there's going to be varying opinions, but I'm sure you probably still have some contacts within and friends or people that are too afraid to speak out. What are you being told about what the morale is, just in general, but also in relation to all of this coming out and just being such a popular topic, especially in the news? I mean, this is a big deal. So, I mean, what are you being told about all this?
So before the situation, the morale was low, right? There was a lot of great things that were happening in the sense of pay raises were happening in the salaries were going up for the men and women on the front lines, and deservedly so. But the morale was low because they're being handcuffed by administration. They're not allowed to do their job. They're micromanaged. They're second guessed on every single decision they make. If it's not a popular decision, then they have to face the wrath of administration. I'll give you a perfect example of we had an off-duty deputy that was driving under the influence of alcohol. One of our active deputies who had so much years of experience in traffic, and he was a drug recognition expert, so a DRE, did a traffic stop on him, determined that he was impaired and under the influence of alcohol. He went to go place him under arrest, was driving him to jail, was called by administration, told to turn back around, and they took that deputy home. What do you think that does? And they called it a medical event. They called it a medical event, right? So that came out into the public as well. But you have deputies like that want to go out there and do their job, and for all the right reasons. They want to represent law enforcement as a whole for all the right reasons. And they're being handcuffed. So the morale there was not good. Since then, it's gone down drastically. The men and women that are there now, the majority of them that I believe that are there, want this to be over because they are walking on eggshells and pins and needles. Like, what's next? What's the next shoe to fall? If this is true, which I believe it to be true, because this to me there's beyond probable cause. If this is true, what else is gonna be uncovered at some point in time? What other lies have we been told our entire career that he's been there in 6 years?
This is crazy, man, because I don't know if you're following. I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but I don't know if you're following the stuff that's happening in New York City right now, with the police commissioner resigning just 3-4 weeks ago, and then the interim police commissioner just had his house raided by the feds. The mayor Adams was just indicted yesterday on federal charges. A lot of people, and I'll be honest, I mean, I kind of had some thoughts too, that like a lot of people were linking this to P. Diddy. I don't know if it is, but all these people were close with P. Diddy. There's pictures of these people with P. Diddy, and it may or may not be. I don't know. I'm not gonna just say that it is. My point is, I'm going somewhere with this. The trust that is eroded right now between the public and law enforcement is so bad. Man, I put a video out on TikTok 2 weeks ago, I think. It ended up getting around 160,000 views and like 2,100 comments. And when you go in and you look at the comments, I was just saddened to see, because when I put the video up there, my point was to try and bridge the gap between, as a former law enforcement officer with experience, and to try and bridge the gap with the public. I called out some of the wrongdoing on that traffic stop, and I even called out Tyreek Hill's wrongdoing, and I just said, listen, my point was to try and bridge the gap, right? And the comments in there, man, some of them are so violent towards law enforcement, and something that I can't support. I can't support violence towards law enforcement, but what I can get behind is holding these public officials accountable for their malfeasant and misdeed, corrupt behavior. And that's the whole point why I started this organization, Failing Justice, was because it happened to me. I had to deal with it. And, you know, just like you have been labeled as a disgruntled former employee, I was labeled as a former disgruntled employee. And that's what their playbook is. That's their play, and their tired old playbook is they're just former disgruntled employees. No, I mean, there are some of us, a lot of us, even still active, and it's hard to get the public to understand there are some really good cops out there, man.
There are.
Some of I lost some, I use air quotes for friends. I guess they really weren't friends. You know, I've put some stuff out, and I've had people inbox me and call me and say, I can't believe you're saying this stuff. You know, you've gone off the deep end. You've lost your mind. And they're no longer, you know, friends anymore. And some of them hurt, some of them didn't. But my point is trying to get the public to understand, but it's hard for them to understand whenever these kind of events happen, because they're like, okay, while there may be good cops out here, which ones are? Who the hell can we trust? And that is such a problem when in today's climate, when everything's in question, nobody knows what to believe, and you have this kind of stuff happening, and it doesn't help the cause of trying to bridge the gap, man, bridge the division. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So, like you, when I got sworn in, I raised my right hand to defend the Constitution and to defend others, right? There was no disclaimer or second paragraph that said, with the exception of your administration, right? So, to me, like, some people are like, you know, it must be hard. Yeah, it is hard, but it's never hard to do the right thing. And I'm gonna be faced with a lot of repercussions and a lot of people in the community. But as I told you before, like when we were off camera, the amount of people that have come to me thanking me is my motivation to keep pushing this for every, you know, like, and to your point of, you know, the community takes the stance of, well, if he knew about it, who else knew about it and did nothing with it? And that's a legitimate question and concern. And I genuinely believe that 99.999% of the cops out there are out there for the right reasons and want to do the job because they love it and they're passionate about it. Yes, you have an outlier here and there, but when it's an outlier, it gets magnified to the nth degree. And the easiest way to regain that trust and that confidence in the public is to make sure that you bring it out and not be afraid to bring it out. You know, I laugh and I joke. You know, when I was in Canine, I went after some of the most violent people this county has. I was more worried about my administration than I was the violent person in front of me. I was worried about the administration behind me, what they were going to do to me, than what I was about the person in front of me. Right?
It's
and
so crazy, man, that you say that, because every cop I talk to, and we get on this podcast and we talk about, it isn't the violent offenders that you have to be concerned about. It's your brothers and sisters, you know, within your agency that you have to worry about. Those are the ones that can cause you the most grief.
Jockeying for their next position because they think that that's how it's supposed to be done, rather than doing the hard work and just going out there and doing your job the way it's supposed to be done.
Yeah, and people like you and I, and I've had several other whistleblowers on the show. You know, we get that labeled of, oh, they're just disgruntled, and it's so easy. It's so easy for when you leave somewhere, people automatically, I guess their brain's just wired that way. Oh, you were fired. Oh, you left. Well, that must mean it was for some kind of bad reason and you can't be trusted. Because I can tell you, when I left one of my previous agencies, I left because I was prepping myself to expose the corruption that was happening. I knew I couldn't do it there, just like you. So I built my business. I left. I put my 2 weeks notice in. And those people, once I started talking about it, those people tried to just absolutely destroy my credibility, my name, my service record.
Yep.
And I mean, it's sickening, honestly. It really is, because
character assassination.
Yeah, character assassination, man. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's a book called Corruptible. It's a really good book. It's it's an audio book on Audible, and it's called Corruptible, and it talks about, I've talked about the book before, but it talks about the centuries of corruption and why people crave it, and even if they're not corrupt when they get in positions, they talk about the science behind it. There's been a lot of studies at different universities and things around the world about how people become corrupt and how hard it is actually to not be corrupt when you get in those positions. Because you think about somebody like Sheriff Marceno, people put him in that position because they trust him. My previous chief, the reason they didn't believe me, I was just, at the time, I was just a corporal. And who am I? They don't value those underneath the head positions or the administrative positions, because those are the ones that they're supposed to trust. And there's no way, in the eyes of city council or county commission or senators or whoever, there's no way they could be behaving that way. But there is, and they do.
And it's sad that you have to come with receipts, literally and figuratively come with receipts to be able to even get the attention. And like you said, like, why is this even a thought for someone in such a powerful position to want to even go down this path and have another 14 other contractors of doing God only knows what?
And then sit there and want to increase your budget by $38 million. I mean,
so in 2018, when he took over,
that's insane.
The budget was $186 million in 2018. Today, in 2024, in 6 years, it's $315 million. So basically, $120 million, $140 million, it went up. For what?
Didn't the Lee County Sheriff's Office acquire like a private jet of some sort?
They did. They bought it private, so it wasn't a forfeiture or a seizure. It was a purchase. They sold it, and I was in aviation at the time, so I'm very well aware of this jet. They told the county commissioners that they could use it operationally. You can't use this jet operationally. You have to be 20,000 feet in the air, and it's a pressurized cabin.
Yeah, are you gonna take Taylor Swift to the Chiefs game? Like, come on, man.
They bought it for $1.2 million. They put another $300,000 into it in upgrades, and now it's being sold by a third party for $1.2 million.
Did the sheriff or anybody in administration or anybody ever use that jet to go to conferences or places like that? Was it ever utilized? See, and I didn't know that at all. In my mind, when I saw that there was a jet purchased for $1.5 million, my thought process was like, okay, man, like, I'm sure this jet is being used for luxury travel, essentially. And I just don't know how anybody, and I know I mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast when I read that introduced you that you had done time in aviation.
Yeah.
And I know aviation, like air patrol, air radar is a big thing in Florida. I don't think we do it much in Texas. If we do, I don't know about it, but I distinctly know that because when I drive through Florida, there's always the signs, and you're like, holy cow, they're gonna freaking get me speeding. And a buddy of mine got caught speeding from the air and was pulled over by a ground troop, and so I know that's a thing, but not a pressurized jet, man, for $1.5 million. Like, I just don't know how a law enforcement agency can justify. And then also, they have a big rig, and I don't know if that was a seizure or not, but it's got a nice, expensive wrap on it. Like, what are you going to do with a big rig?
With the big rig, right? Sell it off and take that asset and put it back into the community. That the trail was, and I was actually in the helicopter when that traffic stop was done, ironically enough. But the plane, even if like it's used for conferences and stuff, think of what a first class plane ticket cost. Mm-hmm. Even if it's $5,000 a person and you have two people going, it's $10,000. you just divide it by the 1.5 million it costs, right? Like that's how many trips you have to go on first class.
Yeah.
But this jet, there's only 2 pilots in the entire agency that are capable of flying it, and they both have to be on board at the same time, and they happen to be the two most expensive or the highest paid individuals in aviation. So not only are you the cost of the personnel you're flying, but the cost of the personnel that are doing the flight. And so, and then you have to add on hotels for those people as well as opposed to before. So it just does not make sense, right? Like this is all about
No.
branding. This is
There,
about branding for the next chapter.
there's just no way some things how you can justify, certain pieces of equipment or resource, whatever word they want to use for it. There's just, especially like you said, specifically a jet, that just blows my mind, and how this stuff's getting approved through, who's approving this stuff, man?
Commissioners approve it, but
and
they'll
I
say
mean,
that they don't have any oversight or they don't have the ability to tell the sheriff how to spend the money that they approve. But you're the one approving it. Ask some
right.
questions, right? Like if your 16-year-old comes to you and asks you for $1,000, are you just going to arbitrarily give it to them? No, you're going to ask some follow-up questions. Right?
And
So
that's the problem, man. That's the problem whenever you put people in those positions, and they're the sheriff or they're the chief, and they're supposed to be. The problem is these people, these other people, like the commissioners, even the citizens that voted and elected the sheriff. They just put their trust into that person, and that when you have situations like this, we have these allegations against Sheriff Marceno. That is just in my opinion, that is the biggest violation of trust, is when you were supposed to be serving the public, and you're not. You're serving yourself. You're serving your family. You're serving your donors, those minions that are under you that will always back you no matter what, because they benefit from you being in that position. And it's just sickening, man. And it's and it doesn't just, I mean, obviously we're talking about a law enforcement agency, but the problem is, man, and you look at every facet of this, look at our country, look at our look at our federal government, look what's happening. And so I've always said it, if it's happening at the top, it's going to trickle down, man. And it's really just disgusting. So out of curiosity as well, I mentioned this being hard for you, and I kind of know what you're going through, not necessarily because you're kind of on a large platform right now, but I just saw some of the comments myself on some of the social media posts, man, and people are dogging you. Like, can you tell me? And just real quick though, I want to say, forget that, man. You're doing the right thing, and at the end of the day, I doubt it, but there could be a reasonable explanation for all of this. But even if there is, okay, I know we're stretching here, but even if there is, you did the right thing by putting it out there and questioning it. Because like you said, if you didn't and you were just like, it's no big deal, you are just as guilty. And that means you raising your right hand and taking that oath, you didn't mean it.
Exactly.
And so I want to encourage you, on this topic. I mean, I know it sucks, and you're probably going through a lot, but you've done the right thing, and there's a lot of people out here that think you've done the right thing, and you're speaking up for the people, and you're bringing this to light. And like I said, whether it's true or not true, I think you were in the right, and you did what was right to question it and bring it up. With that being said, can you tell me, I guess, maybe some of like the adversity that you've faced through this, and because I'm sure you have.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer that for you. But the first thing I want to say to you is, if there was a plausible explanation and it comes out for whatever reason and this is completely wrong and that the information Ken gave me was completely wrong, I'll be the first one to stand up publicly and acknowledge and tell Carmine, I'm sorry. But I can do that because I know what kind of person I am. I'm not going to hide behind a keyboard or
Right.
hide behind a written statement, right? So some of the adversity that I've had to deal with, relationships that I formulated over the years, and some of which, you've gone into some serious situations with, have been estranged. People that have come to birthday parties for my kids or graduation parties or were there during whatever, are they're absent. um, and I just take that as a, and law enforcement, especially retirees, um, develop a loner mindset, loner mentality anyways. And I just look at it like, I put my faith in knowing that everyone comes and goes in your life for a reason, and it may not be my purpose to understand that reason right now, but it'll reveal its head at some point in time, and I have to trust that. So my motivation and my driving force is my family. um, so as long as I have their support, I can push through this. This is fine. I hear the rumblings of they're trying to come up with some criminal charges to arrest me on to get access to my computer and my phone. And okay, I'll give it to you. I'll give you my phone. Give me yours. Let's do full transparency, right? Like, let's do it. Let's both of us go out in front of the public and both of us answer questions at the same time. You want to do transparency? I'm all
Classic
about it.
case of retaliation, man. Oh well,
Yeah.
we're gonna come after you. Classic case of
Well,
retaliation.
and why is it and this is across the country, every employee that leaves a law enforcement agency and speaks up is labeled as disgruntled? Why
Right.
why is it that they're always all disgruntled? Or is it just that, the old counter and accuse, deny, counter, accuse? That's the playbook. Deny, counter, accuse. So I know that they're going to come up with something. And in my 17 years at the sheriff's office, I have never been involved in an internal affairs investigation. I've never had a negative mark in any of my evaluations. I will release all my evaluations, actually. I have nothing to hide because I know the ground I'm standing on.
And you're right, man. It's like I said earlier. It's the same playbook, no matter where you are in the country. Whenever
It's
you
sad.
step out and you expose some sort of corruption or some kind of you know malfeasant behavior, it is always, oh well, they're just disgruntled. Weren't you fired, or weren't you let go? And it's like, that doesn't even faze me anymore. I've heard it so many
No.
times because
Yeah.
that's what they circle. That's what they circle around to the community. Is
Yep.
Oh well, you're just disgruntled, and I just laugh it off now because I'm like, it is actually really funny to me that that is all you can come up with is I'm disgruntled.
Yeah.
Well, you just, I mean, let's be honest. Yeah, I am disgruntled that I couldn't continue my law enforcement career because of your corrupt behavior.
Yeah.
Because you're a horrible public servant. You're not worthy of wearing that badge. You're not worthy of wearing that uniform. And you use your power to step on people, good people. So yeah, I'm disgruntled. I'm going to talk about it. But come on, man. Like that's what they always go to. It really is.
He's not a leader. We had a canine deputy that was shot in the line of duty, right? A real leader goes to the hospital and goes to check on that officer, right? Nah. Nobody goes to the hospital and goes to check on him. Why would they?
He didn't show up?
Because no, he didn't show up.
Well, if they would have had the TikTok app open, I'm sure he would have.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
but
they should have said, we're going to do a TikTok, Sheriff. He'd been right over.
yeah, he's not. The problem is he's not a law enforcement officer. there's always been questions about his certifications and stuff like that, and I'm not here to rehash that one, but that evidence is pretty strong that he should not have been able to even sit for the state exam. But FDLE decided that he could, so I can't argue that question. But the overwhelming evidence is he shouldn't have been able to.
Mm.
Well, I'd like to take, I want, because my mind goes 1,000 miles an hour.
Go ahead.
So like, for me, for the, going back to that plane thing, that $1.5 million, you know what I would like to do with that money? Once we sell that plane, is take that $1.5 million and put it into an area where our kids that are the most susceptible to some type of tragedy, which is waiting for the bus and getting off the bus before school and after school, and giving them some covered parking or covered bus stops that they're safe. Because now they have to stand in wet grass or on the corner where it's dark. A lot of our kids have to go to school and stand for buses where it's completely pitch black and it's not safe for them to stand. Why would we not want to do that and gain that community trust and give back to our kids in our community?
Well, because it's not flashy,
It's not flashy. And
it's
that's
not
the
flashy.
problem,
It's
right?
it's and that's the whole problem. And I wanted to ask you about that. Like as you continue your campaign, like what message do you have for the voters, like regarding the integrity of your campaign and the vision for the future of law enforcement for Lee County?
Yeah. So like for me, it's twofold, right? I have to have a plan for the public and to be able to build that trust, but also have a plan for the officers and the dispatchers and the employees that are the civilian employees. For me, a really big thing is mental health. As you're aware, law enforcement, we see a lot of things that our brain should not have to process throughout our career, and no matter what. And our dispatchers, our call takers, they have to listen to a lot of things, and they don't get to have that closure. And we have a terrible mental health program in law enforcement throughout the nation, right? It used to be a sign of weakness or considered weakness, and it's not. And, for me, it's a double-edged sword. Like, how do we respond to those situations when someone's in a mental health crisis of, the de-escalation and things of that nature? You mentioned Tyreek Hill, and that was a terrible job by that FHP trooper. He brought it way up where it didn't need to be. It was just a simple traffic stop. But it's not my job till Monday morning. But that's a training situation for sure for other officers.
I think we do. You says it's not your job to Monday morning quarterback. I think it is, though, man. That term's been around for a while in law enforcement, and you hear it mainly from those within, because let's be honest, cops inherently, naturally want to defend other cops, right? And I understand that. I understand that, but there also comes a line in the sand and say, okay, we can't defend this. And going back to that Tyreek Hill situation, dude, I caught a lot of flack for that because, and I'm just going to talk about it while we're on it, and then we'll get. I think I'm interrupting your question, but I want to talk about that because, listen, when I put out my video, and I'll send it to you when we get off here, but I put out my video and I said, I know, okay, I agree, Tyreek Hill had a poor attitude. Tyreek Hill come out and said, I had a poor attitude. Okay, I'm not excusing that. I think he probably watched the video and was like, yikes, I didn't realize I was that bad. And he had a piss poor attitude. Okay. But let's talk about who is the trained professional in that encounter. Who is the trained law enforcement professional with a gun and a badge that is in charge of that encounter? And my point was, I don't know. I mean, I know Tyreek's, everybody wanted to come at me with several different things. Well, Tyreek's just, he beat his baby mama and he's got history with law enforcement. Okay. But you know what? None of that matters in that moment because here's what I saw. Tyreek had a bad attitude, but he handed the dude his driver's license and he said, write me the ticket. And he wrote his window up. And you know exactly where cops went? Cops went where? Well, the window tint was too dark. He couldn't see in there.
Yeah.
Here's my response to that. Two things. One, I could see Tyreek in there putting a seatbelt on.
Yeah.
I saw where his hands were, and I'm watching a video. That was just number one. But number two, the cop had his driver's license. He had everything that he needed to go conduct that traffic stop. And the cop could have taken that moment and said, all right, obviously this guy has a bad attitude. I don't know what his – and it takes some logical thinking, some really, emotional intelligence in the moment. But all he had to do was say, I'm going to show this person that not all cops are the same. And even though he had a bad encounter with a cop in the past, I'm not going to repeat that same behavior. And he could have walked back there. He could have wrote his ticket. But off the bat, there were already 4 cops there. I don't know why there were 4 motor jocks there. Like the moment that the stop was made, I don't understand that for the life of me. But there were already 4 cops there. And to me, the cop just escalated it. And
for sure,
for no good reason other than his ego was bruised and he was in charge and he wanted to let Tyreek know that he was in charge.
Power.
And so he acted unprofessionally. And you know how it is when you step in the cow patty, you're going to slide and you're going to fall in even more of them. And that's exactly what he did. And when all the teammates showed up and they were like, hey, man, I don't want to cause any trouble. Can you just tell me what's going on? That's my friend. None of them said, we're Miami Dolphins players. Let us go. We're going to be late to the game. You don't have the right, whatever. They were like, can you just tell us what's going on? And I'll be honest, if my family member gets pulled over and next thing you know, they're on the ground in cuffs, I'm going to probably walk up to a scene and say, hey, can you tell me what's going on? And I understand safety, but there was nothing those guys were doing, in my opinion, that presented a threat to those officers just by their mere presence. And I think the whole thing was trash, and it was handled wrong. And I spoke up about that because, I just thought it was not the way a trained law enforcement professional should handle that encounter, and an opportunity was missed to show the public that, or a member of the public that, hey, not all cops are the same. And had he just wrote him his ticket, because he already had his driver's license in his hand, we would have never known Tyreek got stopped.
So when I say it wasn't my job to Monday morning quarterback him, I meant it's literally not my job. Like if I was still in internal affairs and that came in front of me, that officer's guilty.
I got you.
Right? That's what I meant. I am all for holding those accountable that either make a mistake, whether it was intentional or unintentional, and then training younger officers so that they don't do the same thing. So that's what I meant by, like, it's not my job to Monday morning quarterback him. I understand the context that it came out that I was kind of like, hey, head in the sand.
I got you.
I'm not a head in the sand kind of guy, but I agree with you, right? Like there were issues on both sides, no pun intended, of the ball, right? Like for me, the traffic stop wasn't even done, and they already had his agent on the media on ESPN with the co-host of the football show badmouth and saying without all the information being out. Unfortunately, in today's world, in today's society, cell phones paint a one-dimensional picture, and they don't paint the true picture. They give a great objective of what's going on, but it doesn't give everything. And sometimes, sadly, as a society, we are wanting instant gratification. And sometimes you just can't get the instant gratification, and you do have to take a step back. And the correct response, and I'm not sticking up for that officer because he did bring it up. He brought it up to somewhere where it didn't need to be. But the correct response from Tyreek's agent should have been, we don't have all the facts. We will be issuing a statement once we have all the video, the body camera videos, and don't play into the narrative of the cops are bad individuals and they overstep and they're power hungry and all that stuff. Right. Like, so the media doesn't do us any favors either, because the story is so much more important than the actual truth. And that's where we get into issues.
Yep. And I agree that, even I think when the full video came out and Tyreek saw it, I think he was, and I thought that I respected the fact that he came out and said, yeah, I could have done better, watching the
Sure.
video. And that's
And kudos
typically,
to him for saying, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, that was just, and the thing is, somebody made the comment, well, the only reason we know about it was because it was Tyreek Hill. And I agree, because just think of the things that happen in law enforcement across the board that we just don't hear about it. I mean, we touched on some of the stuff. I mean, look, had you not come out and said this, we would have never known about it, right? This crap would have keep happening. Who knows how ever many more contracts would have come out that the sheriff was paying these people. I can't get behind blindly supporting law enforcement, and I also can't get behind blindly blaming law enforcement.
I agree.
There's just got to be a middle ground. Unfortunately, in today's society, and none of this stuff is helping bridge the divide and get the trust back. It's unfortunate that it just keeps happening and keep happening, man. And I think you mentioned training, the younger generation. I think it's so important for the new generation of officers that are coming on board. I told somebody the other day, and I may have said it on the podcast before too, but I think there will come a time in law enforcement where we see a major change for the better. And I think that's coming from the new generation coming in, because times are different, right? You have these old school cops. I can't tell you how many arguments I got in with old school cops about Tyreek Hill and how, 10 years ago, I'd have took my mag flashlight to, and I'm like, come on, man. Like, that's tired. That's old. You're tired. You're old. Get out of here. I mean, we just don't have any place for that anymore. And I think I don't know if I'll be alive to see it, but I think at some point, if the world doesn't crash and burn completely, there will be a time where we see positive change in law enforcement. I think guys like you as well, although you're not a newer generation, you've been in it for a while, and it's refreshing to hear somebody who's done 17, 20 years in law enforcement have the mindset that you have. Like, hey, there's no place for this. There's no place for corruption. There's no place for violence. And I think because of social media and TikTok and YouTube and all these things, the younger generations that's coming in to be cops, they see all this, right? We didn't see this before. We had some, pardon me, but we had some fat donut-eating cop in our seat telling us how to, just do it because I say to do it. You don't need to know why. Well, now you have these cops coming in who are watching these things on the internet, and they're well aware and they're more educated, and they're like, okay, this isn't right. And they're speaking up and they're talking about it. And we've got to elevate those kind of people, because, and protect them from people that are, the old school cops who just want to silence them and call them disgruntled, put some paper in their file, fire them, whatever the case may be. I don't know if you agree with that, man, but I really just think that, I think it'll come. I think it'll come.
I do agree with you. We're going to get to a point where law enforcement is going to change drastically. Some will think it's good, some will think it's terrible. But I also think that some of the old school mentality or some of the old school things that I grew up in make me stronger in some avenues, like officer safety, right? Like that's where the younger generation really lacks, is officer safety. Because they're not cognizant of what's going on, and they're not paying attention to their surroundings. And it's because, if you think about it, the officers that are coming up now that are in their early 20s all the way up until probably about age 30, so when they were born in 1994, they grew up in a society of where it was very technology driven, and their face and their head was already down. Most of their communication came through text message, and they don't understand what the body language is telling you, where somewhere like you and I came into play. So there has to be a middle ground between what these younger kids, I call them kids, are dealing with, versus what the old mindset is of watch the hands, watch the body, watch for them looking and telling you what their next out is going to be, what their tell is going to be. Are they going to run? Are they not going to run? Right. And that comes with a lot of experience. So we as a society and as leaders in the community, we have to bridge that gap and help bridge that gap. And stepping up for the right thing and not putting our head in the sand is step one.
I agree with everything you said. It takes. I don't mean to put a blanket over all old school cops.
No, yeah,
and sometimes it's hard when you talk, because sometimes things that we say, it sounds like it's a generalization, but I didn't mean for that to be. I agree, because you're an old school cop, right? And you have, just by talking to you, what I can gather is a healthy balance of, what's right and wrong, and it all depends on who you get, right? It's kind of like luck of the draw. Like when you come out of the academy and you hit FTO, it's Forrest Gump. It's like a box of chocolates. You really never know who you're going to get, and these officers are soaking this up, right? And that's why it's just so important to have guys, like you with your mentality. I know there's plenty of them out there. I know a lot of good cops, man. It's just we're doing a poor job. I say we. I mean, I'm not an active cop. I still have a license, but law enforcement they're literally doing it to themselves, man. They are losing control of themselves, and it is something that a good friend of mine, he did this podcast with me for quite a bit, but he had to step away for some work reasons. But one thing we talked about all the time was it's a heart issue, right? Like it's in the heart. You got to come in, I think, with a heart for people to do the right thing, man. And there's so many variables to that. I know that, but if you just have heart, man, and compassion to do the right thing in every situation, I just believe that our outcomes would be so different, man, so different. And we need good leaders. I mean, our conversation about Sheriff Marceno, how you say it? Marceno. I've never met the guy. I'd love to. Hell, I'll be honest with you. He could come on this podcast. I would sit down and have a respectful I have some hard questions for him, but the truth of the matter is anybody's allowed on this podcast. But my point is, we just have to have good leaders. And I don't know what's going to be the outcome of all this, the stuff that you're going through and the stuff that's come out. I don't know, but it's not a good look. I can tell you that. At the very least, it just doesn't look good, and it completely erodes the trust of the public. Like I say,
if I wasn't confident in what I uncovered and I discovered and the evidence that I have, I'm not going to accuse someone of something so significant, right? Like I, as I said before, I know the ground I'm standing on. And I know it's solid. I'm not hiding behind a criminal defense attorney who, in a different article, said that his defense attorney said that, and I'm going to paraphrase here, that they're waiting for the results of the FBI investigation before they'll make a comment. Now, the criminal defense attorney walked that statement back and said, I never said that. It was misquoted, whatever. But you said it, and that reporter quoted you. And it alluded to the fact that he knows that there is a FBI investigation going on.
I saw something too that said, I don't remember what article. I read so many of them I've looked at this thing for days. But I read something that said, show us the proof, and we'll, we'll talk about it. I'm not saying anything until we see proof. And like I told you earlier, man, if that was me, there would be a sea of cameras in front of my face. I would be sending emails, inviting everybody in. Come on, let's talk about it. There's a reasonable explanation for this. This is what this was. Let's talk about it, right? So Ken Romano, is he crossways with the sheriff right now? Is that a thing?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
do you
That really
know? Do you know what happened there? Do you know what got them crossways for him to come out and speak?
I do know what the ultimate straw was, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back was. But I'm not going to tell that side of it. That's for Ken to say it when he's ready. Um, but it went back to honestly, it went back to a trust thing. Ironically enough, it went back to a trust thing.
Yeah, I
Where,
respect that
where
answer. I told you, if there was something you couldn't talk about, and I respect that. I saw that people are having to. So your name, they can't print the ballots and put your name on it, right? They have to write you in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So,
So everybody
why I had
listening to this podcast, if you're in Lee County, and I'm sure it'll come up in Lee County, so people in Lee County will probably hear this. If you are in Lee County and you have a problem with this current administration, the leadership, the things that you've heard and you've read, and you're ready for a change, you're gonna have to write Mike Hollow in on the ballot. So, it's probably too late to reprint those ballots. So remember, instead of checking a box and like all Republican or whatever, because I guess you're probably running as an independent. You're gonna have to write it in. So,
Yep.
Write Mike Hollow in on the ballot if you want to change in Lee County. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
There's a lot of people that ask me why I'm running as a write-in, and I'm not naive to think that this is going to be an easy task, let alone even if my name were on the ballot, right? Like, not having my name on the ballot makes it that much harder against a popular incumbent sheriff. I had to do that because in order to get this information out, I had to let the FBI be able to do their investigation. If I had remained as a registered Republican, Carmine and I would have been going head to head in August during the primary. I wouldn't have been able to get any of the information out, nor would the majority of their investigation have been able to be completed. So I had to purposely change my party affiliation so I could get it to the general election, so then I could give this information to the public. It's not my preference, but it was the only option I had available at the time, and I felt it was important enough to sacrifice the political part of it, because again, this is not a political stance, it's not a political stunt, but I sacrificed the political part of it to make sure the message got out to the public, because
Right.
that's how important it is to me.
No, that makes total sense, man. And like I've said, I'll echo it again. Like I really think you've done the right thing here, no matter how hard it is. And I just hope. Do you know? Have and I don't know if you can speak on this. I guess this is maybe two questions. One, have you been in contact with the FBI again? And two, do you know how long it's going to take for them to conclude this?
So the first part, no, I have not been in contact with them again. And then I know Mr. Romano has. He's been in contact with them often because he is the crux of the investigation.
Mm-hmm.
How long is it going to take? I don't know that answer. I'd love to say, you know what, we'll have an answer next week or something to that effect. But like I said before, we don't know how deep this goes. And once they peel back one layer, what other layer of the onion did they just uncover? And it's just going to be this constant peeling back of layers. And at some point in time, I think there's going to be enough layers pulled back where they're going to be like, okay, we got to pull him out so we can get a true understanding of what's going on here.
Well, listen, there's a senator named in that news article, Elizabeth Benaquisto, if I'm saying that right.
Yep.
Yikes.
Yep.
I mean, that's
so.
What was she supposed to be doing for $213,000 in 2 years?
She's not a sitting senator currently, so she's acting as a lobbyist. She acts as a lobbyist for a lot of companies. But why does the sheriff's office need a lobbyist from the state?
Yeah, man, that's
I'd love the answer. I would love the answer. I'd love for anyone in the administration in Senator Benaquisto's administration, anybody, give me the answer. Give the public the answer because they deserve it.
Yeah, that's man. That's a lot of money.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a salary.
that's in 2 years. So our starting deputy is probably close to 60,000 right now. So that's almost 4 deputies positions in 2 years.
Yeah. That's definitely, you're right. 3.25, man. That's crazy. And
Yep.
let's ask for 38 million more. Approved, no problem. And he got it.
So
he got it approved.
I'll throw another number at you, right? So when I in 2016 under the previous sheriff, our employee count was right around 1,600. As of December of last year, the employee count for the Lee County Sheriff's Office was 1,689. Went up 89 positions in 6 years, but increased by $120 million. Where is all that money? Where did it go? How is it benefiting the residents of the county?
These are good questions, man. These are good questions that somebody's going to have to answer. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on, Mike. Again, I want to let everybody know listening, if you want to vote for Mike Hollow, and I think that you should, write his name in the ballot if you're in Lee County. Also, those that are following this that don't live in Lee County, share this stuff, put this stuff out there, because the more people that know, the better, the more pressure, because as I know, it takes pressure and lots of pressure to squeeze corruption out of a law enforcement agency. Unfortunately, it sucks, but that's the fact. And Mike, I again, I applaud you, man. I think you're doing a great thing, and you're very brave. And you are a welcome guest on this podcast at any time. And if we happen to have any kind of updates or whatever, in the meantime, we may do another one. But I appreciate, you coming on and being a part of it, man. I really do.
Thanks, Justin. I applaud you for doing this, because you are being a voice for those that can't speak. So continue to do what it is that you do. And I'd love to come back and give you an update of what's going on, no matter which direction it goes.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, Mike. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, for listening to this podcast. As always, being a part of the Failing Justice community. You can follow us on all social media platforms. The @ Failing, the number 1 Justice, the @ Failing, the number 1 Justice. So @Failing 1 Justice. You can also find us at failingjustice.org. Share this episode. Share the website, share the social media platforms, and because what I am trying to do in bringing people on at Failing Justice is prevent this very thing from happening, and talking about it, getting credible people on, and having these conversations. That way we can bridge the divide and have a better system for all of us. And so thank you, everybody. And until next time.
It's not just an organization, it's a call to action. Join us on this journey, satisfaction. Dismantle barriers, build with passion. For a future where justice is not a fraction. Yeah, failing justice. Yeah, failing justice. Yeah, failing justice. Failing justice. Failing justice.